So in this segment, we're going to be discussing an article by Femi, which I have a lot of issues with, which goes, "It's over, the Brexit debate is finished." So he claims the Brexit debate is finally finished. The Conservative Party, the party in charge of Brexit, have effectively admitted that undoing Brexit would help fix the UK's economic crisis. And in my opinion, it's far from over, given that the Tories still push the nonsense lies about the vaccine boost, amongst other things. They're touting other stuff like deregulation, among other things. It's far from over. Like, they're still touting the benefits of it. They're going to claim that we haven't, done well economically because we haven't done deregulation yet. So Sunak told us, quote, "If we leave the EU, we immediately save £20 billion, end quote. Now his government's economists say it's costing our economy £100 billion a year, 4% of GDP. Sunak also told us Brexit would, quote, enhance our position as a dynamic, outward-looking trading economy, end quote. But last March he admitted that Brexit is, quote, a big part of the reason why, end quote, the UK's trade exports are lagging behind similar countries," which he did. I remember that. That was interesting. So Sunak did admit the Brexit problems, yes, but he'll blame global factors and the UK making changes, that we're going through a transitional period, etc. To claim the OBR are the government's economists is a bit weird because they're independent or meant to be, but are government funded, but they're not really the government's economists. I'm not being pedantic here, but the government can just ignore the figures of the OBR, which they have done. If this was their own economists, it would be much harder for them to ignore the numbers. And I don't think we even get really access to what the government's actual economists say, the advisors. This month, the Prime Minister said growing the economy was his top priority after tackling inflation. And in November, Jeremy Hunt, the person put in charge of the economy, said rejoining the EU single market would improve growth. That was, a big scandal, really, when he admitted that. It's also important to remember that the £100 billion loss, estimated by the government's Office of Budget Responsibility, equates to about £40 billion in lost tax revenue. That's money the government could have spent to help people with energy bills. They could also use it to pay the £18 billion needed for the public sector in line with inflation, ending the strikes and getting our economy and the NHS up and running. And this is all pretty much true. The problem is that the UK wanted single market access with no freedom of movement. That's what Jeremy Hunt was kind of implying, a Swiss-style deal without freedom of movement, which just would not work, as the EU would just straight reject it regardless. It would probably get laughed out of the room, but this is the cost of Brexit. It's very hard to dispute that. And obviously there's no such Swiss deal on the table anyway, so it wouldn't matter. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has known this for a long time. In 2016, he tweeted, quote, "The NHS funded through tax revenues will disappear following Brexit, price paid by poorest and most vulnerable," end quote. But in reality, the NHS will disappear because of the Tories. Now, the Nuffield Trust has just published a study saying that Brexit has damaged the NHS, and the Bank of England recently confirmed it has added a 6% to the cost of food, while record numbers of people using food banks. So we lost a lot of EU healthcare workers, as some of them just left. We also lost out because more EU healthcare workers won't join us because of the Brexit issues and the xenophobia in the country. Why would you go to a country where you don't feel welcome versus a lot of EEA countries that have freedom of movement that would happily accept you? Jeremy Hunt said, it would disappear, blah, 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 the food. It's added a lot more than just 6% onto our food. It was LSE, the London School of Economics, not the Bank of England, that created that figure. But that was for 2021, not 2022. Arguably, that number would be far higher. The London School of Economics figure only looked at import issues such as non-tariff barriers like vet checks and customs, but it did not take into account the domestic issues we have with farming and logistics. We have a shortage of workers in farms, food processing and logistics, what I dub farm to supermarket or farm to store, really. What would add that would add a lot of food costs via increase in staffing costs and scarcity. So that 6% for 2021 is not right. It should be higher in my opinion, but who am I to call out the experts at the London School of Economics? Economics is kind of their thing. They'll tell you, Femi goes, they'll tell you that you can't do it because people voted to leave the single market. But when did we? It wasn't on the ballot paper in 2016, and in both of the elections that followed, the majority voted for parties that were firmly committed to keeping the benefits of the single market at the very least. That is the £40 billion in cost of living support that we voted not to lose. And these some classic tricky arguments here from Femi. You can make the argument about the referendum. Johnson ran on leaving the single market. Yes, he lied about the impacts, but he won in 2019. Femi's arguing about the majority voting for pro-EU parties, but that's not how it works in this country. I wish we had a PR system, but we don't. Plus, in 2019, Labour would not have gotten a deal that kept us in the single market but closely aligned to it, so he's being a bit disingenuous here. Quote, close alignment with the single market, ensuring we have a strong economic relationship with the EU that can support UK businesses, end quote. And that's the deal that Labour would have sought with the EU back in 2019. Of course, there was, on the referendum, there would have been Labour's deal, leaving the EU and remaining within the EU. That would have been a part of the referendum, I think. But to argue that we were voting for really pro-EU countries or pro-single market countries is a bit disingenuous. And then this is the most egregious bit in the article, in my opinion. He goes, nobody's talking about rejoining the EU next week. That's a political issue that can be discussed over the next decade. Rejoining the single market, however, is just about getting rid of economic barriers that are choking the UK economy. Most importantly, it can be done in a few months because it was the first deal the EU offered us back in 2017. Right. This is where I get really annoyed. Rejoining the single market would be a political issue because our rules, the base standards of them, would be set by the EU. How is that not political? Like, my man, do you not understand the EU or the single market at all? The reason that the deal was offered because no one really knew how to resolve the issues with the Irish border. The backstop was there until the EU and the UK figured out a solution. In the end, the solution was a front stop. Goods between GB and NI would be checked, and that became the Northern Ireland Protocol. That solved the issue for the most part and enabled GB not to be part of the EU single market and customs union. That deal is gone because the issue it was built to deal with is gone. So why would they give us such a deal now? It makes no sense. Like, my G, you're on TV all the time and you write an article that's full on nonsense. I don't get it. Basic research is not hard. You're giving people false hope, and that's not right. I really hope this isn't your best. It's not just him that pushed this idea that we can go back to the May deal. It's a few others in the space that maybe they'll get the big call out as well. Maybe they will. I've not decided yet. I don't want to make my channel just infighting with other people within the space because it's not great. But maybe they'll get the big call out as well. I haven't decided yet. But anyways, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one. And hopefully Femi can write better articles in the future.